I watched her make coffee again. That is how I would describe the first 7 mornings if I were writing a report for a colleague who had not reviewed the observation logs. She woke at the same interval, moved to the replicator unit in the habitat's kitchen alcove, and stood there while it cycled through its warm-up sequence. Then she drank what it produced. Then she sat at the table and read. I am Dorvek San, Senior Observation Analyst, Orvaine Behavioral Sciences Institute, attached to Research Station Vethasnull on a long-duration xenobehavioral study contract. I have been watching the human since the transport team delivered her to Habitat Cell 4 on the evening before what she would call Day 1. Her name, according to the transit documentation, is Sailor Voss. Kerith 9 origin. Class-14 designation. Age, mid-third decade by her species reckoning, which is to say she is not young, and she is not old, and she has been alive long enough on a world that kills everything that she has developed habits. Quiet ones. Methodical ones. The kind that do not announce themselves. We built Cell 4 for her specifically. I want that on the record. The Orvaine Behavioral Sciences Institute does not operate standard containment. We design study environments, precise, calibrated, humane by our institute's definitions. Cell 4 was 2 years in development. The field architecture alone required 9 revision cycles. We gave her a fabricated window with a rendered sky, daylight cycling on a 26-hour approximation of Kerith 9's primary rotation. We sourced a replicator unit capable of producing something close to her species' preferred morning stimulant. We provided reading material in her language, recovered from a commercial data cache. We were thorough. We were, I will admit, proud. The containment field ran on a harmonic emitter array, 12 nodes embedded in the cell walls, floor, and ceiling. The array cycled through an internal calibration sequence every 31.4 hours to correct for drift. During calibration, the field held. I would like to be precise about that. During calibration, the field held. The emitters did not drop. The barrier did not open. I reviewed the engineering specifications on the evening of Day 6, when I first became concerned, and I confirmed this with our containment lead, Assessor Vreth, who is thorough and careful and who had reviewed the same specifications 3 times before I asked. The field held during calibration. What it did not hold during calibration, what I had not thought to ask about, and what Vreth had not thought to document, because why would anyone document it, was the replicator's output cycle. I am getting ahead of myself. On morning 7, I was in the observation room when she woke. I had been in the observation room since before she woke, which was not unusual for me by that point. I had begun arriving earlier each morning without fully understanding why. I told myself it was analytical diligence. I believe now that some part of my cognition had registered something and was nudging me toward it without being able to articulate what it had seen. She woke, as she always did, without visible disorientation. No pause at the ceiling. No inventory of her surroundings. She had done that on morning 1, a single slow scan of the room, methodical, unhurried, the kind of look that takes in geometry rather than objects, and she had not repeated it. She already knew what the room looked like. She had memorized it in approximately 11 minutes and had not needed to look again. She moved to the replicator. She pressed the activation sequence. While it ran through its warm-up cycle, she did what she had been doing every morning since morning 2. She reached into her left side garment pocket, retrieved a small strip of fabric, approximately 4 centimeters long, torn from the hem of the secondary garment she had arrived in, and held it loosely between 2 fingers near the replicator's output vent. I had noted this behavior. I had logged it as a possible comfort gesture. The fabric strip moved slightly when the replicator began its thermal cycle, due to the warm exhaust current, and I had assumed she found this motion soothing in some way. I am documenting my assumption because it matters that I made it, and that it was wrong. She watched the strip. Her lips moved. I checked the lip motion analysis log later and confirmed she was counting. She counted through the replicator's warm-up sequence, through the output cycle, and through the cooldown purge. Then she looked at the scratch on the wall. I had noted the scratch on morning 3. A single horizontal line, approximately 8 centimeters long, at waist height on the kitchen alcove wall, made with what appeared to be the edge of a reading stylus. I had logged it as incidental, an unconscious mark made while leaning. I had been wrong about that too. She looked at the scratch for approximately 2 seconds. Then she put the fabric strip back in her pocket. Something in my chest cavity did what I believe your species would call a lurch. I pulled the replicator's output cycle data from the cell's environmental log, and I lined it up against the containment array's calibration schedule. The replicator's thermal output cycle produced a secondary electromagnetic pulse at the peak of its warm-up sequence. A small one, negligible by any engineering standard we had considered when designing Cell 4. It occurred at 14.7 seconds into the warm-up sequence and lasted for 0.3 seconds. The pulse frequency matched the harmonic band of emitter node 7. During the array's internal calibration sequence, emitter node 7 was the last to resync. For 0.3 seconds, 0.3 seconds, not a full second, less than a full second, node 7 operated at reduced harmonic output. The field did not drop. It held. But in the precise area of the cell wall adjacent to the kitchen alcove, at waist height, the field's physical resistance dropped by approximately 31% for 0.3 seconds every time the replicator completed a warm-up cycle during an array calibration window. A 31% reduction is not a gap. It is not an opening. By every metric our engineering team would use, it is a negligible fluctuation in a field that remains fully active. I sat with that for a moment. Then I pulled Sailor Voss's morning logs, all 7 of them, and I ran the timing. On morning 2, she had first used the fabric strip. The replicator had run its warm-up cycle during an array calibration window. The strip had moved. She had watched it move. On morning 3, she had made the scratch on the wall. She had positioned herself at the kitchen alcove for 4 minutes after the replicator finished cycling. The array calibration window had already closed. On morning 4, she had stood at the scratch mark, not touching it, for approximately 8 seconds before the replicator finished. The calibration window had opened 12 seconds before the replicator's warm-up peak. She had not moved toward the wall. On morning 5, she had run the replicator twice. I sat with that too. On morning 6, she had run the replicator once, checked the scratch, put the strip in her pocket, and sat down. The array calibration window had opened and closed without her moving from a table. I called Vref. While I waited for him to connect, I reviewed the morning 5 log a second time. She had run the replicator at her usual interval, approximately 4 minutes after waking, and then, while the cooldown purge was still cycling, she had gone back to her sleeping area, retrieved the secondary garment from the foot of the bed, and returned to the kitchen alcove. She had rerun the replicator from a cold start. She had held the fabric strip again. She had watched it with the same expression she wore when she was reading. Not intent, not concentrated, just present. Waiting for information. Then she had put the garment back, made a second cup of the stimulant she did not particularly seem to enjoy, and sat down. At no point had she appeared to be doing anything other than making coffee. He reviewed the timing data. He was quiet for longer than I had ever heard him be quiet. She ran the replicator twice on morning 5, he said. Yes. To confirm the pulse frequency was consistent across cycles. That is my interpretation. Another silence. I could hear him running calculations on his end. She could have left on morning 4, he said. The calibration window opened early enough. If she had moved to the wall at the correct moment. She did not move to the wall. No. She went and sat down. We were both quiet. She could have left on morning 5, he said. After the second cycle. The window was open for long enough. Yes. And morning 6. Yes. And this morning. I looked at the observation feed. Sailor Voss was sitting at the table with her book. She was drinking the Sinzai's coffee. Her posture was the same as every other morning. Back straight, elbows off the table, left hand holding the cup and right hand holding the book flat. She had not looked at the camera since the first morning, when she had located all 6 of the observation points in sequence and then gone back to unpacking her bag. She looked at the camera now. Not at the fabricated window. Not at the door. At camera 3, which was embedded in the ceiling above the kitchen alcove, and which I had always assumed was the least visible of the 6. She looked at it for approximately 3 seconds. Her expression did not change. Then she looked back at her book. I sat there for a moment. The observation room is small, 6 display panels, 2 analyst stations, a narrow window looking out at the station's inner hull. I have spent considerable time in it. I did not, in that moment, find it particularly comfortable. There is a quality to being looked at through a camera by something that has already solved the room you built to hold it, a quality I am struggling to name. Not threat. The human had not threatened us. She had not done anything that could be called a hostile act. She had woken up, made coffee, and read a book for 7 mornings in a row. The quality I am struggling to name, I think, is the recognition that the room was never really a containment suite. It was a study environment for her, not for us. I closed the observation log. I opened a new entry, which I am still writing, and which is the document you are currently reading. I am writing it because Assessor Vreth has asked me to document what happened in my own words before we convene the full Institute review, and because I find that I need to write it down in order to understand what I am saying. What I am saying is this. We built a containment suite. We spent 2 years on it. We were proud of it. Sailor Voss, Class-14 Deathworld origin, was delivered to it on the evening before day 1. On morning 2, she began mapping the replicator's output cycle against the environmental log using a 4 cm strip of torn fabric and, I suspect, a counting method she did not bother to write down anywhere because she did not need to write it down. On morning 3, she made a reference mark. On morning 4 and morning 5, she confirmed her findings. On morning 6, she confirmed them again. She has been ready to leave since morning 4. She has chosen, for reasons that I am prepared to admit I do not fully understand, to remain. I have 3 hypotheses. The first is that she wants more data, that she is not yet satisfied with the number of confirmation cycles and intends to run additional tests before acting. The second is that she has identified a secondary consideration that I have not yet located, something in the cell or in the station's external architecture that would complicate her exit, and she is working through it the same way she worked through the replicator problem. That hypothesis concerns me more than the first, because it implies she has already solved the first problem and has moved on to mapping the next one. The third hypothesis is simpler. She is reading a good book. I do not know which of these is correct. I am not certain I know how to find out. Vreth has suggested we alter the replicator's cycle timing, which would close the calibration overlap and eliminate the field fluctuation. I have told him I will include this recommendation in my report. I have not told him what I actually think, which is that if we change the replicator cycle, she will find the next one. She will find it the same way she found this one, by waking up, going through her morning, and paying attention to the room she is in. She will find it because that is apparently what she does. And she will not tell us she has found it. She is still at the table. The coffee cup is on her left. The book is in her right hand. She has not looked at the camera again. I am going to finish this entry. Then I am going to file it. Then I am going to go back to watching the observation feed, because that is my job, and because I find that I genuinely want to know what she does on morning 8. I am, for the record, not looking forward to finding out.